Hello and welcome to this episode of Akrinos Access. I'm your host, Eric Matei, joined today by Mark Clark,
Hello.
writer, speaker, optical guru, consultant. Mark, what are you not? I know you're involved in so many amazing things these days across the optical and eye care industry and so much more. But really excited to have you here for this fascinating conversation. This whole concept that we're going to unpack, doing more versus doing different. So, Mark, thank you for joining us on Access.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, and I'm passionate about this topic, and I was excited when you shot me an email, and so I'm looking forward to digging into this a little deeper.
Yeah. So on that note, let's go back to where it all originated. You had made a post on a social media platform that, I don't know, it was intriguing. Why don't you kind of unpack that? Share what the post was and really kind of what inspired it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the post was basically, it's not about doing more, it's about doing different. I guess the history of that post would be really, really long because, I visited just about every independent optical in the state of Michigan, about half of them in Ohio, most of them in Kentucky, and all of them in central Tennessee. So that's probably over 500 or 600 independent practices. And, when you think about how are we going to move forward, how are we going to do differently, and profit more, have more time for ourselves. I didn't visit many offices or really any offices where nobody was trying. It's like there wasn't anybody who's like, I'm booked out 3 months, but I only see 3 patients a day. I'm like, okay, well, maybe you could do more.
Right.
So, I mean, everybody, you've put in all that effort to earn your credentials. You're a worker and you're working, so I would be insulting your intelligence most of the time to say, do more. And so if progress is going to happen outside of where you're at, there's 2 buckets. There's more, and really there's different. And so helping people to think along those lines of identifying different, and the same with your staff. I mean, there may be some staff members who can do more, if we're honest. But a lot of our good staff members, they can't do more. We're going to have to take some things off the plate. We're going to have to look at different in a lot of, aspects of the business altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. What a cool way to kind of open up this conversation, right? And again, based on your experience and being around so intertwined in the industry. And look, I know you mentioned like a kind of a geographic area, but I know outside of that, you travel nationally, you speak, you connect with so many ECPs, opticians, what have you. And I love that observation, right? You've never, like, rare are you observing someone who's just downright lazy. Like, okay,
right.
Yeah, like you got to put a little effort into it. But typically that observation, again, that you made, it's not a matter of not trying, but really it's realizing that if anything, a lot of folks are kind of at that capacity, at that limit. So let's then start to unpack this and maybe talk about some of the impacts that doing different can have across the practice. And whether we're looking at, patient journey, internally looking at operations and workflows and kind of the impact to economics, let's kind of start to unpack that next level and looking in the practice, maybe some of these areas where doing different. And I don't know, Mark, maybe to start this, we'll do something kind of fun and, I don't know, go back and forth, kind of flip-flopping, like a top 10 craziest things that we can't believe we're doing in the modern era.
Yeah,
I mean, you go first.
Yeah, I think I think one of the biggest things to just think about, almost every office is year round, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. we have a lot of boxes we put ourselves in. Maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't, and what I say is, and you kind of introduced this, let's just dig it all apart. And what I call that is a box labeling session. So what are the boxes you've put yourself in? And let's just label them. What are they? Do I have to be 9 to 5? Does that make sense? I know some practices, one in Michigan, and really all of my learning is just from practices, listening to them. What are they doing?
Sure.
It's different than the others, and why is it working? And one of them just had an early Friday. They would open up at like 5 or 6 a.m. It was all executives, lawyers, busy people that spent a lot of money on eyewear. They let their staff go home at noon that day. Everyone loved it. I'm like, that's an interesting idea. It may not work everywhere, but what are the boxes? I think sometimes the schedule that we keep is a big box that we could
Sure.
change, and grab a different market, grab a different patient base, just by maybe changing that around a little bit.
Yeah, and I think to build on that also, you mentioned the box labeling, right? And obviously every practice, there's things that are going to be different in every practice, right? However, there are kind of some of these, I think some of these, what has become the norm, the status quo, that I
Right.
think we really need to start getting into. And look, that's a really great piece there regarding schedule, because look, it's not a matter of sticking to the old way of doing things, those confines, but rather realizing, as a matter of fact, I feel like every now and again we'll see in some of the periodicals some great studies released, just what's latest in consumer behavior and NPS scores,
Right.
and what are people wanting. I do recall there was a stat a few years back, something like upwards of 40% of patients were wanting to schedule outside of routine exam hours. But look, it doesn't stop there. I mean, we could go down the list, and I think another hot topic is a managed care, the role of managed care in that provider-patient relationship. And again,
For
any
sure.
one of these things, I think we could start labeling some of these boxes. But I really love how you started with the schedule. I think it's also interesting that you mentioned that, because you opened the conversation saying how everyone's kind of seems to be kind of at the max of the workload they can take
Right.
on. So fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, that's, for a lot of people in their lives, if you're going to have a life outside of work, sometimes you can't do more, but you want to grow into an area, or maybe for a newer practice, you're trying to grab a specific group, and maybe the way to grab them is differentiation, and the differentiation that you offer mainly against your competitors may be a different set of hours or a different, offering of sorts. So we know the benefits of differentiation. When you differentiate, you're not just competing. I have this price, you have this price. I have this frame, you have this frame. When you differentiate, you're offering something completely outside of the competitive circle and giving them a different reason to come and shop with you. So from that perspective, it aligns as well.
Absolutely, Mark. And that's a really critical concept to toss out there, especially now when, let's face it, care and materials, I mean, now they're accessible through so many different avenues, through so many different channels. I think it's now important, now more than ever before, there's an opportunity for, right? I don't see this, and I don't think you do as well. We don't see it's not a doom and gloom. Oh my gosh, there's all this competition. No, if anything, right now more than ever, there's so many cool ways to differentiate, to
Right.
do difference, to own your brand. And when you're owning your brand, and patients are gravitating to your practice because of what you've got and what you're presenting, and then you're no longer going to be at the whim of these other uncontrollables in the equation. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean go and dump all your vision plans. And by the way,
Right.
we're not going to go any deep. That's a whole other topic that we can unpack elsewhere. But it's a good example, because let's face it, a lot of folks do have these BCPs. But getting back to it, it's not a matter of dumping those, but it's a matter of what truly is bringing the patient in the door, right?
Yeah.
hey, it's take every plan under the sun if patients are coming to you for the right reasons. And that's I think a critical piece where now more than ever, if the patient is coming in, there's a wonderful opportunity to start to engage them in some of this differentiation. And on that note, Mark, I mean, maybe we can kind of dig a little bit deeper this whole concept of differentiation and just kind of what you've seen in all of your years being around the business. And on that note, maybe share a little bit about your background, how you came into optical, and kind of a bit more, put that in context. And then love to get your thoughts on some of the biggest differentiators you've seen that have really stuck with you over the years.
Yeah. So I came into optical accidentally. I was young. I was in my early 20s. I was getting married. I was working in kind of a nonprofit realm, which meant I also had no profit. And I needed health insurance for my wife and my family. And so I wandered into an optical laboratory and started surfacing lenses. And being a high myope and a mathematician, I'm looking at all these numbers and they all make sense to me. I'm like, this is all really simple. Like,
it's amazing. It's a dream job.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So then, I started looking, where can I go in this industry? And, the next step out of the lab was dispensing, and then managing practices. And then I bought a practice. Then I got into wholesale, and that was when I really got into a lot of practices. You're traveling around, you're knocking on doors all day long, every day. So that was kind of the history of it, and just trying to learn from all of these offices. And, Michigan at the time when I was there was just suffered the automotive crash, was devastating for the whole state, just suffered the housing crash. Offices were closing left and right. And so I basically said to myself, there's offices that are surviving this, and how are they doing it? What steps have they taken? And maybe they had different ways of handling an insurance, whether it was what they decided to do in-house, or whether they decided to offer that insurance company's own frames, or however they decided to make changes. Or maybe it was just in their marketing campaigns, or how they did things. I wanted to know, because, I was losing offices just to bankruptcy, losing accounts because they were closing their doors. And I wanted to be able to help, everyone in my territory talk it through. Let's figure out how to move forward, how to make a better margin, how to do some different things to really, protect, in a way, protect my book of business, but protect them and make sure I still had doors to knock on.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. That's really, that's far out, witnessing that firsthand. And again, these observations of who's surviving, what are they doing differently, that's getting them to this point. So on that note, I mean, why don't you share some of these? I know you mentioned earlier, scheduling being something, just simply differentiating on value, perhaps, optical offerings, packages. What are some other cool things you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, we've come a long way in the history of, what is a modern practice. Way back when I first started out, back in the day when people were first advertising like 1 hour glasses, that was like the way to differentiate. We've come so far since then that kind of fell by the wayside. We don't hear as much about that, these days. Nowadays, we hear more, about dry eye, sports vision, and those are great ways to differentiate, but you kind of have to look at your local market, because if everybody's doing that, you're not really differentiating. If everybody has a dry eye practice, everybody has a sports vision practice, you're not necessarily differentiating if everybody's doing the same things. So initially, when you're first to market, you are differentiating, but it's kind of a journey. We slowly morph together. It seems like in this industry,
Sure.
We slowly move, the same direction together. But it's about looking at your local area, what's happening, maybe it's accepting different plans. At my own office, when I bought it, they were closed on Wednesdays. And I found out that the local ophthalmologist who didn't have a dispensary did all of his surgery follow-up refractions on Wednesdays. And I would come back to the office to all these missed calls. And I told the staff, I said, I think we're going to be open on Wednesdays from now on. Even if we got to close Monday or Friday,
Sure.
I think we could do a lot of post-cataract glasses on Wednesdays. And sure enough, we opened on Wednesdays and we were getting post-cataract glasses like crazy. And then I started, developing a relationship with the ophthalmologist office there in town and saying, I'll what can I do to help your customers more? Let's help each other. Let's figure this out. And, it's just, you have to know your market as to what is going to be a differentiator, what is going to make a change and a difference. And so you may have to jump out there and do a little research about the offices in your area to really know what can I offer that's not being offered? What is the gap? Like a gap analysis. What's the gap here? And how can I fill that gap?
Yeah, I love it. And by the way, what I was writing here, she said, how do we define the modern practice? And the fact is, the modern practice is constantly evolving. And it's only in time over, say, we look over the last 20 years, say, it's only in time that you see, oh, wow, these things have evolved, they've morphed radically. But it all ties back to the one, and I'm going to toss this out there, and would love for you to unpack this a little bit, because I know you're huge into this. As we like to say, do you remember that? What was that movie from the 90s? Field of Dreams,
right?
If you build it, they will come. To out with that, it's not if you build it, will they come? And better yet, I'll say this: why take the risk and the headache and the heartache of if you build it, they will come, as opposed to build for the people what they want? And it lies in the data. It rests in the data. It was only when you saw the missed calls on a Wednesday, you had all this data, and you're like,
right.
We've never gotten this. We never get this many calls. What gives? Right? It's in the data. And I know, obviously, as with the work we do, we get into some amazing geospatial analyses. I mean, it's one of the core analytic pillars of a modern practice, right? But that's not it. I mean, every which way you looking at the data, but from a differentiation standpoint, that's where it all starts. So, Mark, why don't we unpack some of that? Some of the data that you're finding helpful and useful, perhaps, that viewers can take to start to explore how they can differentiate.
Yeah, for sure. As we look at all the different things that you can do as an office, and the Vision Council puts out just some great reports that, you don't have to just sit there and guess what are people looking for? What are they trying to find? Whether that's from an inventory perspective, whether that's from a specialty perspective, those reports give us great insights into what their shopping habits are, what their trends are. And you can pour through those reports, or if you just read the summary, even, because the summaries will come out in Vision Monday, the summaries will come out in all the journals. But we have a consumer base, for one, that's moving much more digital, much more online. We see that they're extremely convenience driven. So, as you're thinking about what can I do differently, I tell practices all the time, be the most convenient practice possible. Look at your patient flow, look at your, look at your website. Is it convenient? Can they find what they're looking for? And unpack all of that and think about, how can I be more convenient? Because they're after convenience more than they ever have been. And what I tell people all the time, that's good news. And the good news about that is at the convenience store, a Coke costs me 3 times as much as I should pay for it. So convenience is something, it's an extra thing that we're willing to buy. And so to me, that's an important, the data is suggesting that. And it's interesting. The data says the number one reason they shop from their local provider is convenience. So that tells me there's some offices that are convenient. But the number one reason they go online, convenience. So it's the driving force in either case as to where they decided to make a purchase. So that tells me there's offices that really are and really aren't. So that's a great differentiator that you can add in just by, looking at it. When I go to my PCP, I feel like it's terribly inconvenient. I check in online. I check in the app. I check in at the desk. It's like, how many more ways can I check in here? Like, how many? I just want to know.
What more do you want from me?
Right.
Love it. Well, Mark, I tell you, I'm glancing at the time here. We're
cooking along. Yes,
we are humming along. Well, I'll tell you what, let's because I do feel like we could probably unpack all sorts of different fascinating topics. And I got to tell you, man, a lot of really cool insights here. But I would like to shift gears here, kind of for this closing bit of time together to maybe talk about how can doctors do different in their practice, right? So like for someone out there listening, just looking at their practice like, yeah, you know what? This is spot on. It really is time to do different. Where do they start? How do they identify the need? How do you find the right solutions and stuff? Maybe just kind of share with some of that. What can they look at in their own practice this afternoon and start to uncover opportunity?
One of the things you sent over in the preview of the questions a little bit as we talked it over was the way we've always done things. And that phrase, I think I hate more than anything. We've always done it this way. So it's like that box labeling session, go through what have you always done? Does it make sense to keep doing it? Is it a box or is it a real constraint? Because there's real constraints, maybe they literally roll the sidewalks up in your town at 5 p.m. I don't know. What is it, a real constraint or is it a box? And look through it, in different phases of the practice, whether it's cold start, you're tempted in a cold start to just kind of do what everybody else is doing, but ask some questions. And when I bought my practice, a recently purchased practice, they're established, they're doing things, but interview the staff, say, what have you done about this? Did it work? Did it not work? Why don't you do this anymore? Why don't you sell this? Have you tried marketing like this? Have you tried pricing like this? Have you tried advertising here? What have you tried? Has it worked? Has it not worked? What was the hurdle that you labeled as a constraint? Let's determine if it's a constraint or if it's just a box we put ourselves in.
Yeah.
And go through everything and look at it that way and figure out, is this a box or a constraint?
I love that. I love that. As a matter of fact, Mark, I mean, that is like, I'm just thinking of so many things. Oh, hey, look, and not just fascinating. A lot of these concepts apply to business and personal. I mean, it applies to just life, right?
Yeah.
Whether that pursuit is in business and entrepreneurship or whatever it may be. So amazing stuff. So start with the box labeling session. And so true, because that is going to provide that starting point. And then from there, right? So then from there, as you are going through and kind of identifying these boxes, Mark, I'm a big fan of this concept of bandwidth for change. A lot of the work we do in Akrinos, right? We're working with established practices. Hey, we can have the most amazing vision out there. It's really all about bandwidth for change and balancing that, right? To be sure we're implementing those things that are going to result in sustainable impact. So start with your box labeling, then prioritize, right? And prioritize in the context of that bandwidth for change. Is it feasible, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really comes down to, kind of a risk benefit, as well on the priority side of things. You give each thing kind of a risk benefit rating, and some of them may not be worth pursuing, but others it's like, hey, let's try to do this.
Heck yeah. Love it. Well, I'll tell you what, Mark, why don't this has been a really amazing conversation. Thank you again so much for joining us and unpacking this topic. Again, fascinating topic. I think now more than ever, I agree with you 1000%. Now more than ever in eye care, in opticals, remarkable opportunity to do different, right? And so why don't you, before we hop off, why don't you share a bit about the different stuff that you guys are doing and that you're leading over there with Modern Optical and Ocho Vision and solutions you guys provide and how folks can get in touch with you.
Yeah. So, we've been working on digital solutions for eye care offices. So virtual try-ons, e-commerce sites, just helping them think about the patient journey as a whole differently, and align themselves with the data. We know that a patient comes in every 2 to 3 years. They don't always remember even the doctor's name. So they start by Googling you. They Google you, put you in their GPS. So the interactions we know begin online, and we want everybody to have what that customer's looking for. The data says they go to several websites before they ever come to a local office, trying to figure out, what do I want to wear? I don't know what I want to wear anymore. And so helping offices kind of, rethink the journey and provide the solutions for the patients that they're looking for. So you keep them within your sphere and ecosystem, so they're not having to go to other sites and other places to, look for what they're already looking for. So that's really, the road that we've been down, trying to make as many, digital innovations and tools for the office, helping them think differently about their marketing. They should be marketing their practice every step of the way, along the line of doing differently. If you're already texting, emailing, sending communications to your patients, by all means, add advertisements on there for your business. Don't just say, hey, your appointment's Thursday. Say, hey, your appointment's Thursday, and visit our website and look at our styles. Just do a little bit differently. If they're going out the door with a contact lens prescription, have your contact lens specials on that sheet, or have a QR code to your online ordering platform, whoever that is, on that sheet. Just some little different things we can do all along the way to increase our capture rate and, increase our revenue. I like to think in terms of revenue per hour. Let's think about how we can increase revenue per hour, because we only have so many hours.
Sure.
So,
yeah, love it. Absolutely. And folks who want to learn more about Modern Optical, Ocho, catch a demo to see. It's really fascinating. It's a fascinating platform that you guys have. modernoptical.com. And Mark, how can folks best connect with you? I know you and I cross paths all the time in LinkedIn land.
LinkedIn land. You can find me there. You can't connect with me anymore because I've maxed out at 30K. So you can follow me there and message me anytime.
Well, Mark Clark, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Akrinos Access, unpacking a really cool concept, right? Doing more versus doing different. To all of our viewers out there, thank y'all so much for tuning in. And if you're looking for more great practice management insights and, just fun, cool, inspired conversations like this, subscribe to the Akrinos YouTube channel and follow us on the socials. Mark, thank you again for joining.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was a blast.